Hi guys, this is Dr. Alejandro Vogel again. I'm back with you to talk about the weapons of influence or principles of influence. They're called weapons sometimes because they can be used against us, or we can use against other people to make them do what we want. And sometimes that is desirable if we're willing to motivate, quote unquote, people to do things. We need to understand what motivates people. Yes, we have some interesting motivation tools and stuff like that, but there's some basic stuff that we still do as part, not necessarily of evolution. Remember, I don't believe in interspecies evolution, but I do believe in intraspecies evolution, which is evolution within a species, and we have done some of that, and we still carry um, some of those responses as a result of some stimuli, and we need to know what these are. Again, remember the Abraham Maslow's pyramid of a hierarchy of needs, but we also need to understand that there are certain principles that still work. They have stood the test of time. This webpage I'm going to post, but it's basically changingminds.org, and you look for Robert Cialdini, and you'll find the six principles of influence. And we've talked about reciprocity already, and it's called the obligation to repay. And basically is, and if you don't believe me, well, we can look at more the description here. But basically, it is that we have something called that have a need, overwhelming need, to give back when something is given to us. Some of you may say, well, that doesn't work with me, but it works enough of the times to make it profitable and effective. It means that even if it doesn't work 100% of the time, well, it works enough to make it, to have a good rate of return on it. In the sense that if it works 60% of the time, that's quite enough to get what you want. So basically, as human beings have a need to give back. Somebody pays for lunch, we feel some kind of obligation to say, okay, next time I'll pay. If somebody gives us a gift, we have something inside, in Christmas, if they give us, maybe I can give them something too. If somebody invites us to a party, next time we have a party, we'll invite them to our party. It works enough to be a principle. Some of you may be immune to that, but I'm sure at a certain level you have a need to be reciprocity. Like you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, like somebody said in the class. And it works. And the thing is that the mind doesn't necessarily make a distinction of small favors as opposed to big favors. All it understands is the favor was done to us. And let's see an example here where it says, it says a nonprofit organization gives away a pen with a request to fill in a form to make regular donations. This significantly increases returns. This is scientifically proven. So, the fact that sometimes you'll say, oh, yeah, I'm not going to give anything, doesn't mean that it doesn't work enough, times. All you need is a percentage that respond to this need to give back, enough to cover for the cost of the pens that you're giving away, and to get something. So if you see it as an investment, if you get, if a pen costs you $1, and let's say I'm actually, it's too much. A pen can cost you 50 cents or less, but let's say it costs 50 cents. Then that would be $5. And let's say only 3 people responded to that reciprocity thing, and we're talking, and maybe they gave you $10 each, and that's $30 for $5 investment. That's quite a bit. So that's what I'm trying to prove with this. And when there was no pen, people realized that the response was less, so it increases the return. Okay, it's much larger than investment. For example, a salesperson does a lot of research for a customer in the assumption that this will make the customer feel obliged to reciprocate by buying. Well, yeah, when you talk about things that are interesting to the customer, the customer feels that you have done some research on them, and they feel that they need to do something back. And this works, and maybe salespeople don't know how to explain it, but they have it as a technique, even though they don't. Even you've probably heard of Dale Carnegie, which is a little bit cheesy, but he didn't know how it worked in the mind, but he knew that by talking to customers about things they were interested in, for example, something that they found interesting as golf, they would be inclined to buy. He didn't know exactly how it worked, but it's reciprocity all the way. Um, so you can look at a discussion there. We're not going to go because we did go into that before. The other principle that we talked, I'm going to go to directly to authority, is that again, if we put ourselves in a cave, we're going to find structures eventually about authority figures, the shaman, the doctor, the lawyer, whatever, different, have take different roles. But we need to follow a particular authority because we need to feel safe and that things are in order. Therefore, authority figures are something that is very powerful on our psyche. And let's see what the example says here. A person dresses to look like a university professor and speaks using technical sounding terms. He is able to bluff his way into a conference. Well, I haven't done that, but I could. In a way, I expert. For example, here it says a professional expert invited to speak on a TV show speaks assertively with a conviction, quickly criticizing any alternative views. When we say we have an expert on TV, we already, with the fact that it's an expert, whether it's an expert or not, we tend to give to attribute some kind of authority in the field that he or she is speaking. Now, I'm not saying this works 100% of the time because we can have a complete loser talking to us about, and so-called expert. But just the fact that, for example, and we talked about this, somebody wearing a white coat, a doctor, a person of authority. And we tend, come on, when you go to the doctor, you tend to believe everything he or she says. Even though it's, and it takes a while before somebody gets a second opinion when you're sick, because you trust your doctor, you do everything he says, and and that's not necessarily the case. They make mistakes. Just to give you an example, I went in, I got an operation from a doctor. I'm not going to say the name, but I didn't need the operation. I found out later that it was an unnecessary operation. It was completely uncalled for, and I didn't need it. It was completely money-making scheme by the doctor. But I believed him. I believed him. I put my trust in him because he was an authority figure. And this guy was drinking while he was on the operation. While I was on the operating table, he was drunk. And later I found out that it was, he was fired from he was actually taking the license away from the United States because of that. He came to Nicaragua to practice medicine because here anyone does that. But again, the white coat and the doctor thing makes you in a vulnerable position, and you respect that. The same in certain cultures, same happens with judges. Here, we don't have much respect for judges because they haven't earned it. But in certain countries like United States or like the Scandinavian countries, a judge is a person that we respect. And also, when we have studies, and I mentioned this the other day, when we quote a particular expert on a field, we're borrowing authority. I do this all the time. I'm using it right now with Robert Cialdini. This is not Alejandro's principle, it's Robert Cialdini's 6 principles. So this guy is placed on authority and has earned his authority. So I'm using his authority to convince you guys that this is true. Now you may believe me or not, but I'm sure you will, because this is scientific research for this enough to justify that. Now, the other thing that we're going to talk about is consistency and commitment. We have an overwhelming need to be consistent or be seen as a consistent person. The worst thing that somebody can do is seem as inconsistent and volatile and not be able to predict. We have to be able to predict people's behavior, or we need to do. When somebody's unpredictable, we feel insecure. So therefore, we have a need to be predictable in a certain way. We need to be consistent with our decisions. If we make decision A, we usually make decision B consistent with the decision A. Whether we're wrong or right doesn't necessarily matter. Let me give you an example. A company gives away free samples. The customer finds that having used the item, they feel more inclined to buy it. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that they like it. They just have used it, and they have making decision B, which is buying it, is just consistent with decision A, which is using it. So this is the whole concept of try and buy. That you may want to research on that is being used today. These free trial periods. It works on reciprocity because they're giving you something, but also works on a level of consistency and commitment because, okay, now I've said yes to something, to a request, which is using for free a particular software. And the fact is that I'm being consistent when I say yes, I want to buy this. It doesn't work all the time, but it works enough to be profitable. That's why there's so many free trials out there. Okay, let me give you another example. A parent congratulates their child on working hard rather than rewarding them for doing homework. Before long, the child thinks of themselves as being a hard worker. Okay, a person is more convinced that a horse will win a race after they have placed a bet on it. This is interesting, guys. If you make a survey, they have done this, and people are supposed to assign a probability of winning per particular horse or different number of horses, and they give, for example, a probability of winning 30% probability of winning for a particular horse A. Now, once they've placed the bet on that horse and they do the same survey, the probability of winning in their minds goes up to 60%. Now, what happened? Did the horse, just because you bet on it, became better? Necessarily? No, it's the same horse, same probability, but in their minds they want to be consistent with their decision A, which is trusting the horse in the first place. So once they've made a bet which is consistent with decision A or position A, they feel that the horse is better. This is just a consistency principle. They have not raised the probability of winning the horse one bit. Okay, so you should research this a little bit more. This is going to be on the test. So all these things matter when we're talking about, and you should think about, okay, how can I use this to motivate, and I would say a sales team, because that's one of the people that need more. Everyone needs motivation, but everyone out there is looking for ways to motivate salespeople. Okay, I'm gonna stop it right there for right now. In the next video, I'm gonna talk about social proof, liking, and scarcity. Okay, so I'll see you then, and thank you for sticking with me for right now.